Hello and welcome. I'm Rebecca Jones, the BBC's arts correspondent and your host for today's 2021 Booker Prize shortlist announcement. We're coming to you live from a number of locations around the world, including here on the South Bank in London. And today we're announcing which 6 books have made it on to this year's 2021 Booker Prize shortlist. In a moment, I'll pass you over to the director of the Booker Prize Foundation, Gaby Wood, to introduce this year's judging panel. But don't forget, we'd love to hear from you. And I wanted to remind you that you can use the comments or chat function on Facebook and YouTube, whichever you're using to tune in. You can use this to put your questions and reactions to the shortlist to this year's judges, who will be joining us live in a moment. But before then, it's over to you, Gaby.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hello, everyone. I'm delighted to introduce you live for the first time to the 2021 Booker Prize judges. Rowan Williams, Chigozie Obioma, Natascha McElhone, Horatia Harrod, and their chair, Maya Jasanoff. It has been an incredible pleasure to watch them arrive at this shortlist after many months of shared reading and eloquent discussion in what has otherwise been a largely solitary time. Those of you who don't get to witness their meetings might imagine a Booker panel to be composed of pundits emphatically proclaiming their views. In fact, it's less performative than that. 5 people of disparate backgrounds show each other what they see in a story, what dazzled them or challenged them, what touched them or left them unmoved. In the process, they show something of themselves and come to trust each other as a result. This year's panel did all of that with generosity and candor, and proved, I think, that the best literature is elastic, both because so many different things can be seen in it, and because, as one of the judges said, the best of fiction can make you feel as though your mind or heart are a little bit larger for having read it. Now, before Maya tells you which books are on the shortlist, I'd like to say something about the long list. This year's was especially wide-ranging. It's a shame to have to reduce that group of 13 at all. And in some ways, we don't have to. Last week, we launched a new website at thebookerprizes.com, and on it, long listees, short listees, and winners are treated equally. We tell you which is which, of course, but all of them have earned their place on a shelf in the Booker Library, a place where I hope you'll spend a good deal of time. Some of the greatest writers of the past century have been nominated for the Booker and not won. Doris Lessing, Muriel Spark, William Trevor, to name a few. They are all part of the Booker pantheon, nonetheless, and this year's long listees are among them without diminishment. Still, there is a shortlist. For that announcement, Maya, over to you.
Thank you, Gabby. Well, it's fair to say that this has been a year for reading unlike any other. When we started the process around Christmas, the US and the UK, which is where all 5 of the judges are located, were both locked down, and this invested our reading with a remarkable sense of intensity and focus. It also infused our meetings with a special sense of connection. We had each been absorbed in our own little isolated bubbles in this unique process. And then we got to see the only other 4 people in the world who had experienced exactly the same thing. From Horatia, Natascha, Chigozie, and Rowan, I learned how better to describe and articulate what it is that I found in books. I learned from their responses to see things that I hadn't. And together as a group, we elaborated upon the incredible range of things that fiction can accomplish. Now, people often ask, what are the judges looking for? To which I respond, what do the books have to show us? The challenge, as well as the reward, of reading for the Booker Prize is to open every novel with the knowledge that this could be the winner, to open every book ready to encounter a fresh perspective, universe, and voice. And what a set of books we've read. We read 158 books together between January and June, which works out to be basically 1 book every day. And it's tempting to use this reading experience as an occasion to reflect on the state of literature today. Are we seeing a surge in a particular form, such as historical fiction? Are we seeing a notable preoccupation with particular themes of the sort one might find, for instance, in speculative fiction? Is there an emerging narrative style in the manner of, say, autofiction? Well, all of these, in fact, are represented on the long list that we shared with you in July. And each of these modes seems apt in its own way for a present moment, which seems to generate one thing after another that few of us could have expected, in which the lines between reality and fiction can sometimes seem a little bit blurry. We had a tremendous long list to work with, and I want to reiterate that you can all see it permanently in place on the Booker website. That it represents such a range of styles, settings, and ideas is a testament, first and foremost, to the quality of the books that we had before us, and a reflection, too, of the range of experiences and perspectives we each brought to the discussions. So it's been very difficult to cut this down to 6. We now present to you, however, a shortlist that is marked by a few key qualities. It is immersive, stories you can get absorbed in, voices that get inside your head, which feels reflective of the experience of reading in lockdown. It is global in their authors and their settings. And this feels transporting in a year in which so many of us have been confined to home. And it engages with matters of life and death, which feels poignantly pertinent in the present catastrophic moment. So here are the titles on the 2021 Booker Prize shortlist. Anouk Arud-Pragasam, A Passage North. Damon Galgut, The Promise. Patricia Lockwood, No One is Talking About This. Nadifa Mohammed, The Fortune Men. Richard Powers, Bewilderment. Maggie Shipstead, Great Circle. We're thrilled to share these titles with you and hope they'll spark as warm responses and as active discussions with you as they have with all of us.
Thanks, Maya. Well, what an exciting shortlist. I'm sure you'll all have lots of questions and comments, which we'll come to in a moment. But in the meantime, let's hear from the rest of the judging panel now about each one of the books.
It feels really good to be shortlisted for this year's prize. It feels good to get recognition for this book.
When I heard the news, I guess the immediate feeling was relief, excitement, and a fair amount of anxiety.
It is the most surreal feeling, and actually, I can't believe that it happened while I was in London. My heart felt very full, so to have it happen actually here was very meaningful for me.
To be here, reaching out to a much wider audience about this novel that's been so important to me, that's taken almost 20 years of my life to get out there. It's something that you don't expect.
It feels as if I've been transported to one of the imaginary planets that I might have invented for bewilderment.
It's such an honor just to be included in this sort of tradition of books and to have Great Circle be brought to more readers. I'm really thrilled.
And that is how the shortlisted authors reacted to the news that they've just received. I was building up the anticipation. We are now going to hear from the judging panel, who is going to tell us about each of those books in a little bit more detail.
Hi, I'm Horatia Harrod. I'm an editor at the Financial Times Weekend, and I'm so proud and pleased to present the first of our shortlist, Anouk Arud-Pragasam's A Passage North. This is his second novel, and it's marked by a poetic sensibility and a profound, meticulous attentiveness to everyday experience, what one of my fellow judges referred to as his porousness. But Arud-Pragasam isn't a miniaturist. He's also writing more broadly about how we can live, especially in the aftermath of trauma, a trauma that can affect an individual or a nation. So the story unfolds as our narrator sifts through memories of a failed love affair, while also turning over in his mind the strange, unexpected death of his grandmother's carer, And this was a woman who'd been really, her life had been undone by witnessing the violent deaths of her two sons, who were casualties of Sri Lanka's long civil war. The style of the book was unlike anything else we read over this 9 months. It's long, looping paragraphs, there's no dialogue, and it builds up a kind of hypnotic momentum. So we felt that he was taking on with great seriousness the question of how can we grasp the present, make sense of the present, while also reckoning with the past and with history. So I'm going to pass over to Chigozie for the next of our titles.
Hello, my name is Chigozie Obioma. I'm a fiction writer. I'm very happy to introduce you to Damon Galgut's The Promise. Galgut isn't a stranger to the Booker Prize and I think needs no introduction. He's been shortlisted twice, and this novel was actually one of the first that we read. So we were immediately struck by what seemed at first like an odd narrative perspective, which quickly crystallized into a wonderful and extremely penetrative point of view that is at once wholly transgressive, as it is a reinvention, I think, of the standard omniscient narrator. So the book is an expansive family novel that explores the interconnected relationships between members of one family through the sequential lens of multiple funerals. I would say that we thought that, the unusual narrative style balances a kind of Faulknerian exuberance with Nabokovian precision, and therefore pushes boundaries and is a testament to the flourishing of the novel in the 21st century. In whole, Galgut makes a strong, unambiguous commentary on the history of South Africa and of humanity itself, and the novel can best be summed up in the question, does true justice exist in this world? If so, what might that look like? So this novel's way of tackling this question, I think, makes it an accomplishment and truly deserving of its place on the shortlist. I will now pass it on to Rowan.
To introduce to you Patricia Lockwood's novel, No One Is Talking About Us. This is a first novel, but Patricia Lockwood has already established a very firm reputation as a poet and a memoirist. And her gifts in both those roles are very much in evidence in this book. It's extremely funny, it's poignant, and it's very challenging. The voice of the narrator is that of a social influencer, a presence online. And Patricia Lockwood uses that mayfly attention span of social media to tell a story which at first seems simply to be about the experience of writing on social media. Absurd, comical, outrageous. But then halfway through the book, there's a dramatic gear shift. A family tragedy enters the life of the narrator. Real suffering, real love, and real loss appear on the scene. Without breaking her stride, the narrator continues to write in the same style, and yet that social media prattle is somehow enlarged, extended, deepened to try to cope with an experience it's really not designed for. And the triumph of the book is that it evokes so full a range of emotional discovery, emotional maturing within this apparently very unpromising medium. It tells a deeply moving story with deep emotional truthfulness, a story with its roots in the author's own experience. And we're left wondering about the processes by which language, any kind of human language, is always expanding to cope with the expansiveness of changing human relations and changing human perceptions, often at the very edge of extremity. It's a book of unusual quality, and we're all very delighted to present it as part of the shortlist. But now I'll pass you back to Maya.
Maya Jasanoff. and I'm here to tell you about The Fortune Men by Nadifa Mohammed. So The Fortune Men takes us to a place that none of us had encountered on the page before, and that is the docklands of 1950s Cardiff, jostling with Somali, Welsh, Jewish, Jamaican, and Indian populations. They're tossed together by the tides of empire, which is in the contested process of dissolution, and they're living in the shadows of the Second World War. The novel tells the story of Mahmoud Matan, a Somali seafarer wrongly accused of murder, and it is based on a true story. This figure allows Mohammed to tell a story that is at once intensely local in the Cardiff world, but also very global, as she takes us through the life story of Matan, looping from Somaliland to Tanzania, from Bombay to Brazil. It's full of complex and richly drawn characters who challenge expectations. And it's also grippingly paced. One of my fellow judges commented that perhaps from now on, all noir ought to be set in Cardiff. But the novel manages to combine in a really brilliant way a kind of caustic social observation of historical realities with a deeply empathetic sensibility toward the characters and the communities in which they live. And The Fortune Men, I think, demonstrates what historical fiction can achieve at its best, to get inside the head of the past, while implicitly yet urgently underscoring the present-day persistence of the issues that it takes on, the issues of racism and injustice. And with that, I'll pass to Natascha for our next title.
Hi, my name is Natascha McElhone, and I'm going to talk about Bewilderment by Richard Powers. Archbishop Rowan is a widowed astrobiologist. He writes programs that try to take everything we know about the physics.
Well, clearly we were having a little bit of trouble there with Natascha's audio. I know she was going to be talking about Richard Powers' book, Bewilderment, the other book on the shortlist this year. We also need, I think, to perhaps, are we able to hear from Maya, who was going to talk about Maggie Shipstead's book, The Great Circle? Maya, are you able to jump in at this point and just tell us about that book?
Yes, me again, to talk to you about Maggie Shipstead's book, The Great Circle. Great Circle. It is a book that seems as if it should be launched into the world with the term epic attached to it. This is a novel of tremendous narrative ambition and scale, and it pulled us into its vividly created worlds right from the get-go. It ranges from Prohibition-era Montana to wartime Britain, to present-day Hollywood. Shipstead has an extraordinary ability to conjure characters that are so fully realized one feels that one knows them. Marion Graves, a mid-century aviatrix whose ambition is to complete a great circle of the Earth flying around the North Pole and the South Pole, and jumping up into the 21st century, Hadley Baxter, a young actress assigned to play Marion in a biopic. And the whole book, both the stories of these women and the many people with whom they intersect, spills out in one gorgeously crafted sentence after another, which makes it really absorbing in the manner of the great realist novels of the 19th century, but at the same time speaking to ever-present concerns and questions about freedom and constraint in women's lives. With that, I'll hand it back over to Rebecca or to Natascha if her sound is up and running for the final title on our list.
Lovely, Maya. This is the beauty of live feeds, isn't it? You don't know what sound problems, what glitches you're going to encounter. I think we're still trying to get through to Natascha and adjust her sound. So do bear with us, because I'm sure you, like me, will want to hear what she has got to say about Richard Powers' book, Bewilderment. But in the meantime, Thank you, judges. Let's hear from you while we see if we can re-establish some communication with Natascha. And we've already got some questions, so I think I'm going to come to those now. And Oxford Writer on YouTube has asked, you can't read a book properly in a day. After all, you have told us you've been reading 158. Do judges divide the books between them? So Maya, a question for you about the judging process.
Sure. Well, we do not divide the books. One of the features of the Booker Prize process is that every judge reads every book. Now, it's true that reading a book a day can be a little bit overwhelming. So another thing that we do is we read the books more than once. We set aside some time in our judging process to leave a period between completing our first read through and coming up with our long list. And from the time of deciding on the long list at the end of July until now, we reread all of the titles on the long list. We will now dig back in for a third read of the titles on the short list before coming up with a winner. So I think that this kind of replicates the process of whether or not a book stands the test of time, that we're reading it at these different time scales and we're reading it over and over, and we are all reading it so that we can all come to the table with impressions when we have our meetings.
Okay, that's great, Maya. And in fact, that leads us on rather nicely to our next question, which is from Grace on YouTube, who wants to know, and I think I'm going to ask you, Rowan, if you don't mind, are you enjoying being a judge? Because I can see that it has its pleasures, but it might have its drawbacks.
I have to say I've enormously enjoyed being a judge. Certainly reading novels at this rate is hard work, no two ways about it. And as Maya has said, it's not just a matter of skimming through. You really have to form an opinion, you have to shape up your reaction and be willing to discuss it and share it and test it with others. But for me, the most enjoyable part of the whole process has been the discussion. And I hope I speak for other judges when I say that I've found it a really illuminating and thoroughly enriching experience. We've disagreed, we've got on fundamentally, we've, I think, learned from each other, and I've found it a colossally enriching and really delightful experience. And I'm hugely grateful to my colleagues and to the Booker Foundation for the opportunity of doing this.
Let's pick up with a question from Gabriel Caesar. And Horatia, I'm going to ask you this question, if I may. Gabriel wants to know, what was the motivation for choosing both the long-listed and the shortlisted books? Was readability the goal, or sheer great challenging writing, or both, or something else? So I guess it's a question as much as anything about how you choose the book. What's your criteria? Horatia.
What a great question. It's, I guess our criteria evolved as we read. I think that certainly... sorry, I think I just cut out there. The qualities that have been mentioned were certainly ones that we considered, but each book we tried to consider on its own merits. So every time, as Maya said, every time we opened a book, we had this sense that this could be the winner and that we would take it on its own terms and then thoroughly kind of analyze whether we think it kind of hit the notes that it was trying to hit. So I guess the truth is we tried to take an open-minded approach, and we wanted things that challenged us. Of course, we disagreed a lot. We had to convince each other, and I know that my criteria for what makes a great book, you know, when I came into the process, was probably quite specific. You know, I have certain touchstones of writers I think are the greats. But what was a wonderful thing is that this experience of discussing the books helped to reshape my ideas of what could make great literature and to appreciate some of the qualities that perhaps I would normally not have been so drawn to. So it's a kind of baggy answer, and I guess the answer is we try to keep an open mind and look for the qualities that these writers were trying to evoke with their work.
Well, I think you may say it was baggy. I thought it was rather brilliant. So that's terrific. Thank you for that. I'm just going to pause your questions for a moment because, Maya, if I may, we're having difficulty getting back in touch with Natascha. So I wondered if you might be able to say a few words about Richard Power's book.
Sure, I'd be happy to, and I'm here also going to ventriloquize Natascha to the best of my abilities, because she did share her thoughts with us in the press release and, of course, in the judging discussions. So Richard Powers' book Bewilderment, which follows his Pulitzer Prize-winning novel The Overstory, tells the story of Theo, who is a widowed astrobiologist. And astrobiology, for those of you who are not instantly familiar with it, is the process of basically looking for life on other planets. And he is a widower, thus single parenting a 9-year-old boy, his son, who is a non-neurotypical boy who's been sort of branded with the label of special needs. So on a mission to help his son, Robin, Theo is prepared to engage with an experimental treatment, which leads him into the realm of neuroscience, which involves essentially trying to decode his son's mind in an effort to try to save him. And it draws us into the close, fraught, but ultimately extremely tender and moving relationship between a grieving man and a vulnerable child. Theo is determined to protect Robin from becoming a prisoner of bureaucracy, and this is something of a high wire act on its own. And the account that Powers gives us is beautiful as well as genuinely inspiring. And that, you know, along with his willingness to venture beyond the known worlds into the cosmos, because it features stories of the planets to which Theo imaginatively transports Robin in their storytelling together, make Bewilderment a clarion call for us to wake up and realize what our minds might be truly capable of if we were less obedient to the status quo. Let me just quickly reiterate my congratulations to all of the authors shortlisted today and urge you to go and read all of these books. Back to you, Rebecca.
Maya, thank you so much for that. And let's go back to some of your questions. We've got time just for a few more. And Olivia on Facebook is picking up actually on what Maya was talking about a little earlier about how many times the judges read the books. And Olivia wants to know, did your view of the long-listed books change on a second reading? And Chigozie, I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
My colleagues have said earlier, I think that the great thing about judging the Booker Prize is that you re-engage with these books, and you know so in that way your reading is in some ways compartmentalized. So there are certain things that appear on the shelf the first time, and the second time you engage with the book, that is gone. You remove it, or there are certain things that weren't there, and you put those back. So this is a kind of a metaphorical way to saying that yes, we are constantly shifting our perspectives and our judgments, and there are some books which we read very quickly. So sometimes rapid reading obviously doesn't yield to a kind of a better understanding. But then after we read just 13 books instead of 158 books, we read a bit more slowly and gave it more considered judgment. So yeah, I think that to some extent our perspectives changed, and the ones that didn't change very drastically, obviously changed in a different direction, which is why they're all back on the shortlist.
Chigozie, can I ask you a question? Sorry, I'm not sure if this is in the rules, but I mean, as a writer and as a Booker-shortlisted writer, I wonder, do you feel, or is it perhaps too early to say, whether your writing has been influenced or changed even by having read all these different books?
Well, coming into these, I I thought that Gabby Wood was trying to destroy my brain by asking me to be one of the judges. But then I understood while reading that, man, what I thought I knew about what makes fiction work actually may have been misinformed. So this has been a very a learning process for me. Now I understand better what it means to write what a great work of fiction. But also I now understand that being on the Booker Prize anything list, long list, short list, is an extraordinary privilege that sometimes we might take for granted, because you are going against hundreds of extraordinary writers. So it's a humbling experience for me.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you for answering that. And actually, that leads us on beautifully to our next question, which is from Palash Mahmood on YouTube. Palash says, in my view, selecting the judges is as interesting as selecting the long list. Can I know the criteria and the process for choosing the judges? I don't know if Palash thinks that might rather like to be a judge, but Gabby, I think you need to answer that question. How do you choose the judges?
Thank you. Well, as you heard from Chigozie, the main impetus is to make sure that writers' careers are utterly destroyed. No, not at all. I mean, first of all, it's not unilateral. I mean, I don't do it on my own. We have an advisory committee and there are trustees of the foundation, and there's a lot that feeds in. But the main thing is actually you don't choose them one by one. You choose people who will speak to each other in a particular way. Sometimes I think of two people. I mean, it's a little like fantasy football, not 100%. Two people who will possibly change each other's minds. And I think the main thing really, if you're thinking in that way, is to imagine all the books that they might read, it's hypothetical, and imagine putting together a panel on which every book stands the best chance of finding its ideal reader. And then once you've done that, once you've thought, are you representing readers who are interested in all sorts of different fiction, then you have to think about their personalities actually. You have to think about whether they will get on with each other, whether they're prepared to have their minds changed. And the alchemy of that can be, it is very interesting, but it can change. It's very movable, slightly Rubik's Cube each year, but very, very enjoyable to think about, and even more enjoyable to watch in action.
Yes, and I suppose perhaps more challenging this year because, of course, they haven't all been able to get together in the same room. So much has been done remotely, as so much of all our working lives has
Although
been.
they've done brilliantly, despite that, and a little bit of, quite a lot actually, of last year's judges worked like that. And well, it's an enormous credit to them that they've done it so generously, so compassionately, so well, and that they've been so friendly throughout.
Yeah. Interesting, Gabby. Thank you for that. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for your questions and for tuning in. Please go and read all of the shortlisted books. Hopefully we've whetted your appetite, and make sure you do get behind your favourite on social media. The 2021 Booker Prize ceremony to celebrate the shortlist and announce this year's winner will take place live from the BBC's Radio Theatre on Wednesday, the 3rd of November. And you can tune in on Radio 4's Front Row programme or the BBC iPlayer from 7:15 p.m. We'll look forward to seeing you there. In the meantime, it's just for me to say thank you for watching and being with us from all of us. Bye-bye.